Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
It started with her phone. Every time I called, it rang out. Straight to voicemail. Sometimes not even that, just silence. I wasn't looking for arguments. I wanted to hear her voice. Check in, see how her day was going. But after 2 weeks of nothing but cold screens and unanswered messages, I stopped trying. I'm not stupid. I know what it looks like when someone's pulling away. But even knowing that, I still gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was work stress or she just needed space. That's the line I fed myself every night when I stared at her side of the bed and saw nothing but untouched pillows. She would still come home late. Quiet. No explanations or effort to reconnect. She'd walk past me like I was furniture. Drop her bag, heat something from the fridge, and then vanish into the guest room, claiming she needed uninterrupted sleep for early meetings. I started watching. I remember the envelope clearly. It was wedged between a flyer and some coupon packet in our mailbox. A big red stripe across the top. Late payment notice. I frowned. The name on the front was mine, but I didn't recognize the sender. At first, I figured it was junk mail, maybe some error by the credit card company. I had 2 cards, both paid off, both with alerts set up for every transaction. Still, I opened it. The letterhead was clean, corporate. The kind of paper that makes you sit up straighter. Inside was a balance statement for a platinum rewards account I'd never opened. Minimum payment overdue. Interest accumulating. It didn't make sense. I walked inside, letter in hand. She was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, still dressed from work but already wrapped in a blanket. You opened something in my name? She looked up, blinked. What? This? I said, holding it out. Card I've never seen. Has my name, my address, but not my signature. She barely glanced at it. No idea. Maybe the bank screwed up? Maybe. But then 2 days later, another one showed up. This time from a different bank. Same story, overdue balance, opened under my name. Then another. And another. For different institutions. All tied to me. All charging interest. All quietly stacking debt behind my back. I tried to keep calm. I brought them to her like a man offering a puzzle to solve. Is this some sort of mistake? I asked again. She shrugged. I'll look into it later. But she didn't. She never did. She kept scrolling. Kept disappearing into that spare room. Kept treating me like I was a background noise she could turn down whenever she wanted. I stopped asking. Instead, I got curious. One night after she'd gone to bed early, again, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled up my credit report. I expected a couple weird lines, maybe clerical errors. What I found were 6 new accounts, all under my name, opened in the last 10 months. Some with balances in the thousands. None of them mine. That was enough to knock the air out of me. But the real blow came later, after I started digging through the filing cabinet we kept in the den. She never touched it. Never had reason to. But I remembered one drawer was always just slightly ajar. Paper sticking out like it didn't belong. Inside were forms. Applications. Copies of signed authorizations. And one folder stood out, thicker, heavier. It was a policy. A life insurance policy. On me. $500,000. Signed. By her. It wasn't just the amount. It was the date. It had been filed a few weeks after she stopped picking up my calls. I sat there for a long time, staring at that paper. No reaction or yelling. Just a cold, creeping numbness spreading through my chest. She had set up a plan behind my back. Money, accounts, insurance. Everything in motion while I was still trying to reach her through voicemails she'd never listened to. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move from the kitchen table. Morning came, and I was still sitting there when she walked in. She looked at me, bleary-eyed, and muttered something about needing coffee. I didn't say a word. I looked at her like I was seeing a stranger who lived in my house. That's when I knew. This wasn't distance. It was something else entirely. And whatever came next, I wasn't going to whisper into the void anymore. I didn't ask her anything that morning. No accusations or demands. Just silence thick enough to choke on. She poured her coffee, muttered something about traffic, and disappeared down the hallway. Like the man sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of unpaid credit accounts and a signed insurance policy on his life wasn't worth pausing for. The second she left, I moved. First, the printer. I made copies of everything. Every letter, every bank statement, the full credit report, even the insurance documents. I didn't rush. I took my time, double-checked each page, filed it all into a manila folder, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my office desk. Then I opened a new account. Just mine. separate from everything we'd built together. There was no panic in me or racing pulse. Just this cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. By the time she got home that night, I was ready. She walked in talking about some coworker's birthday, still in her own world, oblivious. I waited until she finished the story, let her set her bag down, get comfortable. Then I spoke. I'm going to need an explanation. She blinked, caught off guard. About what? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't wave papers in the air. About the debt. About the cards in my name. About the policy on my life with your signature on it. Everything in her froze. Her smile, her posture, her tone, it all dropped in an instant. Like a mask slipping mid-performance. She didn't deny it. She sat down and started crying. It wasn't the kind of crying that comes from guilt or a breaking open kind that admits fault. It was defensive, performative, almost rehearsed. I didn't know it got this bad, she said between choked sobs. I just thought it would be short-term. I was trying to fix things, not make it worse. Fix things. That's what she called opening 6 lines of credit behind my back. That's what she called signing her name to a policy that would pay out if I stopped breathing. She wiped her eyes, stood up, started pacing. I'll sort it out, okay? Just give me some time. I'll talk to the banks. I'll figure it out. I didn't interrupt. I watched her unravel. When she finally paused, I nodded once. You have 24 hours, I said. After that, I get a lawyer. Her expression changed again, panic fading into calculation. You'd really do that? After everything? I didn't answer. Because yes, I would. The next morning, I waited. I watched her move around the kitchen like she thought if she acted normal enough, maybe I'd forget everything. She didn't touch the folder I left on the table. Didn't log into a single bank site. Instead, she looked at me and said, "You going to keep treating me like a criminal?" That was her opening line. Not "I'm sorry." Not "here's what happened." Just a shot fired straight into the question of trust. You think I'd hurt you? She asked, voice rising. You think I wanted any of this? She turned it around like she'd done this before. Guilt judo, shifting the weight back onto me. I didn't respond. I was done trying to have conversations that looped in circles. Instead, I pulled out my laptop, logged into our joint bank, and started moving. Every linked account, frozen. Shared line of credit, flagged. Autopay under my name, canceled. She watched from across the room, arms crossed, saying nothing now. After that, I drove to the lawyer's office. The receptionist asked if I was filing for divorce. I told her not yet. Post-nup, I said. Debts, division of financial responsibility, account separation. I needed airtight. We sat in the conference room going over the details. I want every account in her name traced to her alone. I'll handle the household bills, the mortgage, but the credit cards, the loans, those are hers. And the insurance policy? Canceled today. He nodded and got to work. On my way home, I stopped by the insurance office. Canceling wasn't complicated. One signature, one call, and it was gone. The agent glanced up after seeing the file. Did you authorize this originally? I shook my head. When I walked back into the house, she was sitting at the dining table, her laptop open, but the screen black. She wasn't typing. She looked up at me. So this is how it's going to be? No, I said, setting the folder down. This is how it already is. She didn't say a word after I laid the folder down. Just sat there with that distant stare she'd been perfecting for months. I went to bed alone, same as always. Except now I knew I wasn't imagining the distance. There was no mystery anymore. By morning, she was back to pretending. She moved around the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee like nothing had happened, set one in front of me, sat across the table, and looked like she was gearing up for a talk, but not the kind I was waiting for. I was up all night thinking, she said softly, wrapping her hands around the mug. And I feel like you've made me the villain here. She took that as permission to continue. I get that you're upset, she said, but don't you think freezing everything and drawing up legal papers is a little extreme? That word hit a nerve. Extreme. Like the months of lying weren't. Like the idea of ensuring my death wasn't at least worth a hard conversation. I didn't say that, though. I looked at her. What would you have done? I asked quietly. She stared at the rim of her mug, then stood up and walked toward the sink. That policy, it wasn't what you think, she finally muttered. It was just a precaution, in case something happened to you. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like covering my life without telling me was just good planning. I stood and grabbed my keys. Where are you going now? She asked, arms crossed. To make sure that policy's dead and buried. Same as whatever we used to be. That's when the mask cracked. You're seriously going to punish me over this? She snapped. I turned toward the door. Her voice followed. After all I've done for us, this is what I get. That was the moment it became clear she didn't regret any of it. Not the lies, not the hidden debt, not the policy. What she regretted was getting caught. And now she was shifting gears, fast. From tears to accusations to gaslighting in record time. You're sabotaging our marriage, she shouted. You want to destroy everything we built because you got your feelings hurt. I opened the door. You destroyed it, I said without looking back. I'm just refusing to carry it anymore. I spent the day finishing what I started. I finalized the credit freeze, emailed confirmation to the lawyer, and closed out the last of our shared utility accounts. I transferred the mortgage autopay into my new personal bank. Changed passwords, canceled subscriptions. There was no satisfaction in it, just a dull sense of necessity. By early evening, she started calling. First once, then twice, then again and again, all from the other side of the house. I ignored everyone. She could knock. She could ask to talk face to face. But she wanted the easy route, the same way she'd taken the easy route through every one of those credit applications, every lie, every silence. Instead, I sat in the garage, surrounded by tools I hadn't touched in weeks, letting the air settle. My phone buzzed again. Then another text. Can we please talk like adults? Too late for that. We already talked. She wasn't listening when it mattered. Later that night, I came back inside. She was sitting on the stairs this time, phone in hand, like she thought proximity would help her case. I don't want this to fall apart, she said quietly. I walked past her. She followed me. I'll pay the debt, she said. Quicker now, more desperate. I'll get a job, cut spending, whatever it takes. You need to give me a chance to fix this. I stopped. You already had the chance. For months. She stepped closer. And I was scared, okay? I didn't want you to see me as a failure. That word hung in the air. Failure. But she didn't fail. She chose. Over and over. To lie. To hide. To sign papers she had no right to. And now, when the lies had weight and name and interest rates attached, she was scrambling. Not because she saw the damage, but because she finally had to feel it. I need time, she whispered. Please. I looked at her for what felt like the first time in weeks. The smudged eyeliner, the shaking hands, the practiced helplessness. Then I shook my head. This isn't about time, I said. It's about trust. And you spent it. I didn't speak to her for 3 days. Not out of spite or punish. Just because I had nothing left to say. Words wouldn't do anything anymore. They'd already been ignored, twisted, or used against me. So I gave her what she'd given me, silence. But unlike hers, mine wasn't careless. Mine had weight. She started to feel it almost immediately. On the first day, she tried her usual moves, small talk at breakfast, comments about the weather, questions about errands. I didn't engage. Not with hostility, but with distance. I responded only when necessary, and only with facts. No emotion or tone. Just plain, functional replies. By the second day, the guilt began leaking into her voice. Are you seriously not going to talk to me at all? Still, I stayed even. I'm talking, I said once, without looking up. Just not entertaining fiction. She slammed the cabinet shut, left the room, then texted me 5 minutes later from upstairs. If you're not going to work through this with me, then what's the point? Exactly. That was the point. Working through something means both people were trying. But one of us had been forging signatures and hiding financial bombs. The other had been trying to make dinner reservations and fix broken faucets. On the third day, she finally cracked. I canceled the cards, she announced as I stepped into the house after work. I called all the banks and told them it was my responsibility. I nodded. I also emailed the insurance company to make sure the policy is gone for good. She followed me down the hallway like she was waiting for a pat on the back. Doesn't that mean anything to you? She asked, exasperated. It means you cleaned up the mess you made. She sighed loudly, as if my indifference was more offensive than her betrayal. What do you want from me? She shouted suddenly. I said I'd fix it. I'm trying here. I turned to face her, calm but firm. What I want, I said, is not to have to wonder if I'm being lied to in my own house. That shut her up for a second. She stared at me, jaw clenched, eyes watery, but still searching for some foothold to argue from. I don't know how to make you trust me again, she whispered. You can't, I said. Not now. Not anymore. That night, I went into the safe where we kept our important documents. It had always been a shared space: birth certificates, house papers, legal forms. I took everything that belonged to me and placed it in a separate folder. Then I added something new: a small envelope with the post-nuptial agreement, now fully executed and notarized. The lawyer had sent me confirmation earlier that day. Her name was now solely responsible for the debts. The joint account was permanently closed. The insurance cancellation had been formalized. Everything was as it needed to be. One final step remained. I removed my wedding ring and looked at it. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. No tears. Just the realization that the circle had broken long ago. This was just paperwork catching up to reality. I placed the ring next to the folder and closed the safe. The click of the lock echoed in the quiet room. She came in moments later, holding her phone like a shield. "You can't keep shutting me out forever," she said, voice cracking. "I'm not shutting you out," I replied. "I'm stepping away from something that's already collapsed." "You act like I meant to hurt you," she muttered. I just stared at her. "No one accidentally opens 6 credit cards in someone else's name," I said. "No one signs off on a life policy for their spouse and forgets to mention it." Her hands dropped to her sides. "So that's it? After everything?" "Everything," I repeated. "Exactly that." She walked out without another word. For once, I didn't feel like I had to chase, to explain, to patch the cracks. I'd done my part. Now she could sit with the weight of what she built and what she lost. And in the stillness that followed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace or quiet, but certainty. The first call came the next morning. I didn't answer. Then another, and another. By noon, she had left a dozen voicemails, each with a slightly different tone. First confused, then frustrated, then pleading. I let them sit in my inbox, unheard. After everything she'd ignored, dismissed, and deflected, I wasn't going to race to the phone just because her panic had finally arrived. It was too late for that. Silence had become my answer, and it echoed louder than any argument. She sent a text next. "Can we please talk face to face? Just 10 minutes. I need to explain." I looked at it for a second before locking my phone. 10 minutes. That's all I ever wanted for months. Just 10 minutes of her attention, her honesty, her presence. But she'd chosen distance, apathy, and excuses instead. And now that everything was slipping beyond her control, she suddenly remembered how to reach out. I went about my day, did laundry, cleaned the garage, paid bills from my solo account. She showed up at the house around 6 p.m., knocked instead of using her key. That told me everything. I opened the door and stepped aside. She walked in cautiously, like the house might react to her presence the same way I had. I didn't think it would get this far," she said. I nodded. She stood in the center of the living room, arms wrapped around herself like a kid in trouble. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." That line again. No ownership, just regret about the consequences. She looked around the room like something was missing. I didn't have to guess what it was. My wedding ring, always on the entry table when I got home, wasn't there anymore. "I've been calling," she said quietly. "Texting. I know. You could have responded." I could have. A long pause. "You really put everything in writing?" she asked. "All the debt under my name, just like that?" "No," I said. "Not just like that. I gave you days. I gave you space. I gave you room to explain. And when you didn't, I gave you back the responsibilities you tried to hide from me." She swallowed hard. "What happens now?" "Now." Funny how that word came up only when the damage had settled. "Now," I said. "You figure out what your life looks like without me cleaning up behind it." Her eyes filled, but I didn't move. I was finished. "I thought you'd fight for us," she said, barely above a whisper. I looked at her then. Really looked. The woman who used to reach for my hand in the middle of a crowded room now stood like a stranger, hoping I'd forget who she'd become. "I did," I said, "but I was the only one swinging." She nodded slowly, then turned toward the door. No begging or promises, just a quiet defeat. When she left, I sat back down at the kitchen table. The same table where I first opened those letters. Where she had cried without truth. Where silence grew roots. I reached for the safe key, unlocked it, and opened the door. There, sitting exactly where I left it, was the folder containing every document. The credit reports, the canceled policy confirmation, the legal agreement dividing the life we once shared. And beside it, the ring. I held it in my hand for a moment. The weight of what it once meant was. Then I placed it back in the safe, right on top of the closed file, and locked it shut. It wasn't bitterness. It was just a boundary, a line that finally held. She let every call go to voicemail for 2 weeks. Now, mine was the one she couldn't stop dialing. And this time, silence was my final word.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.